MotoGP 24, the video game, comes out today, and the Blue Ribbon motorbike racing game features riders swapping teams, an adaptive difficulty setting, and actual in-game stewarding for the first time. But how does it actually play, and how does it compare to last year's game? Is it like Marc Marquez when he stays on the bike, or when he falls off the bike? Let's have a look and review MotoGP 24. So I've been stuck into MotoGP 24 for the last week. I've played a fair bit of it so far, and I've also played a bunch of the previous games, both MotoGP 23, 22, and 21. There is a bit different in this year's game compared to the other ones, and if you've never played a motorbike game before, they're quite different to how car racing games work. As you need to lean an actual human being into each corner, you need to turn way before you get to the actual apex. And bikes also stop a lot worse than cars do. The braking distances are really long in these games. If you're coming from the F1 games where the braking point is like the 100 meter board, in MotoGP you're braking at like the 200 meter or 300 meter board. The braking zones are longer and it's way easier to make mistakes. In a car game, if you lock a wheel, you kind of just like run a little bit wide. But if you lock a front brake in MotoGP, you just crash. There's no margin for error. The only feedback you get is from your controller vibrating the closer you are to locking a wheel and low siding. That's the hardest thing for me to manage, and it's the most frustrating part of the game for me, how difficult it is to get the braking right. In this year's game though, I found one main difference compared to the previous games, and that is how the bike handles through the mid to exit of corners. In MotoGP 23, when you were mid-corner and you'd apply the throttle, the bike would kind of like stand up and kind of automatically and just understeer towards the exit of the corner. This was kind of interesting to see, but it was a little frustrating to drive. Every corner you'd get onto the gas and the bike would just go vertical and you'd go straight. In MotoGP 24, this isn't a thing. You get on the throttle and the bike will stay leant over, and you'll often get little bits of wheel spin and stuff as the bike tries to turn and go forward at the same time. Straight up, this is a positive over last year's game. The bikes feel really nice to ride. I think it's a good balance, and I really enjoyed banging laps out. The way the bikes kind of move around and handle it, even like the little wobbles on the exit of corners, it's really fun to drive. This game is very hard though, and I think MotoGP games are up there with the hardest racing games to get into. Something this game has which can make it easier is neural adaptive aids, which were introduced last game, and with this, the game sort of helps you out with braking, turning, and all of that. So if you kind of go a little bit out of control, the game will gently guide you back onto doing what's correct, maybe braking earlier or actually using the racing line. So if you're struggling, that's a good setting to use. In terms of what's hardest to drive, the Moto2 bikes are the hardest in the game, in my opinion, with the Moto3 bikes being a fair bit slower and the MotoGP bikes having a bunch of electronic aids on board to help you out. All three series are in this game, and there's also Moto E, which will be introduced in a later patch. Something that's new for all classes this year is the new stewarding system. Now, on paper, this sounds really good. The game will automatically give out long lap and other penalties to yourself and the AI riders, which you often don't see in other racing games. You'll often see the AI kind of crashing into each other and picking up penalties on their own, which is kind of fun. What we have learned from Gran Turismo and Forza and stuff is that letting the computer do the stewarding is often just not very good. They often make the incorrect decision. I was in my first race meeting in this game and was finishing a flying lap in qualifying. I was on for pole actually, and Johan Zarco was just like chilling half throttle on the main straight, and I couldn't avoid him, and I hit the back of him. We both kept going, but then I got slapped with a long lap penalty in the race for impeding, which was kind of ridiculous, I thought. It feels like the computer gets it right 75% of the time, which is just not enough. Something that's also new in this year's game is the adaptive difficulty setting. With this setting, the game will automatically monitor how you're riding through all the sessions and automatically adjust the balance of the AI so you're getting good, fair racing. This is turned on by default, and honestly, I think this is really good so far. One of my pet peeves in racing games is guessing your AI level. In most, like, other games, you can just kind of select easy, medium, or hard, and it's generally balanced. But in racing games, you need to specify a specific value for the AI, and it's like, am I a 98 difficulty driver or am I a 97? And with the previous game, I'd like take a guess at my number and I'd get to Sachsenring and then just get like absolutely wiped by the computer. And then I'd go to like Jerez and I'd turn into Mick Doohan and win by like half a lap. So Adaptive difficulty kind of fixes this problem, and so far it seems like it has. The racing I've had has been really close. It is turned on by default, as I said, and I think it's really good. Setting up your bike is the same as last year from what I can see. The automatic race engineer is good. You tell them like the problem that you're dealing with, like oversteer or understeer or braking or whatever, and they'll make the right changes to the setup for you. You also get to choose the right compound and the right brake disc for your races, which is a nice challenge. The racing in this game is generally very good. The AI is very aggressive compared to any other racing games I play, which I kind of love. I'd rather this than them like getting out of the way all the time, but you'll often be in a battle all the way through the race, and the AI sometimes does some weird stuff. Tom Harrison Lawn had his entire Moto3 field crash at the first corner at Sebring after exiting pit lane, and I've seen instances of an entire field pile into like a stopped bike on the racing line and they all crash, so sometimes it does some weird stuff. One of my other complaints with the racing is just related to Moto3, and Moto3 doesn't feel Moto3 enough. In real life, this class is an absolute draft fest and pack racing all the way to the end, but in the game, the draft doesn't seem strong enough. This kind of just races like a slower version of Moto2. Graphics-wise, I think this game looks fairly good. There's FSR and DLSS available. I think the actual like riders and like the face models are surprisingly good and like better than the F1 games in a lot of ways. And in the actual gameplay, the movements of the riders is quite believable, I'd say. Also, the liveries and the bikes look really good. There is a day one patch as well, which will update all the bikes with all the aero devices from this year. The main difference in how it looks compared to last year's game, though, is the colours. I've noticed this game's colours are slightly more washed out with less contrast than last year. Going back to last year's game made me realise the colours were very intense. So I don't know if this is a positive change or not, but that's the main thing I've noticed. The weather system is beautiful, just like last year as well, and the flag to flag system is fully implemented with races going from dry to wet or vice versa. Customization is also back. It's very similar to last year, so not really many changes, but it is a really good system and it lets you design your number as well as a butt logo for your character. You also get to customize things like the riding model, how many fingers they use to brake, and what brand of like suit, knee pads, gloves and boots they use. And if you're a karter kid, you can do the standard thing and just make entirely Alpine Stars gear if you want. The sounds in this year's games are really good, with the exhaust cracking, gear shifts, and like even the engine wobble out of corners sounding really good. The engines sound more high-pitched than last year, I've noticed, and the music is just generally very good. I actually like hearing the MotoGP theme rocking up to race meetings, unlike the F1 theme, which like kind of grates on you after a while. Multiplayer wise, you have split screen and the usual hosting and joining lobbies. The main attraction though is Live GP. Live GP is kind of ranked organized multiplayer. There is a season each month, and each season features 10 races to race in. There is a full ranking system, and if you're into smacking other people in this game, this is where you want to do it. So the main advertised feature going into this year's game is that riders will now swap teams throughout career mode. And while this doesn't sound like much, and the F1 games have had this for a couple of years, this is one of my favorite additions to the series just because of how much funny stuff happens. The career mode starts off pretty much the same as last year. You do a few races in Moto3 to finish the season off, and then you sign to a team in Moto2, MotoGP or Moto3 for the next season. And the rider swaps kick in immediately, and we're just very, very good on my game. Fermin Aldegaya has decided to stay in Moto2 and has moved to Honda Team Asia on my save for some reason. Pedro Acosta and Alex Marquez have swapped teams, and Prima Pramac has fired one of their riders. I'm going to assume not Jorge Martin, and they've hired Tony Arbolino, of all people. I do love this feature in career mode just because of the wacky stuff. Otherwise, career mode is pretty much the same as last year. You get like turning point challenges, which are generally just like beat this rider over a race or two and we'll give you special points. And then you do this until you're beating more people, like your teammate, and then you become the number one driver, and then you get to like choose what upgrades you make to your bike, and so on and so on. All the time, the riders will be constantly tweeting at you in-game about something you did in the last race, and you have to do the obvious thing, which is pick the meanest way to respond possible. My new teammate in Moto2 sent me a lovely message to welcome me to the team, and I responded that like, I'm sure the team is happy to finally have someone that knows how to ride a bike. So, yeah, very good. The career mode is fine. I think it's a fine career mode, and Last year's improvement was huge, but otherwise it's pretty much the same. On the topic of previous games and other things that have disappeared, in previous games the formation lap was incredibly bugged. 50% of the time the riders would just like completely crash off the start line. They have fixed this issue in this game though, in the funniest way possible, which is that they've just removed formation laps. When you click race, it just cuts straight to the grid, which I guess kind of works. Otherwise, there just doesn't seem to be enough quite different from the previous games to warrant spending full price on this one if you're on the fence. So I actually really like these games. As a series, I think MotoGP has come way further in the last 10 years than things like the F1 games. And if you compare MotoGP 2015 to this year, the games are so different in terms of how it plays and how the sport is simulated. If you haven't played a MotoGP game in a few years, I recommend buying it. It's a really good simulation of the top level of bike racing on the planet. I'm going to play this game myself, and I love how it feels to drive, and it's challenging but rewarding at the same time and very entertaining. At the same time though, it's not been a huge change from last year's games, especially on the feature side of things. If you played last year or even the year before and you still enjoy it, it's probably not worth picking this game up. Also, if you want to go for it, I'm not going to stop you. I don't know. There's nothing hugely different from last year. MotoGP 24 is out today and it's available on PS5, PS4, Xbox Series, Xbox One, Steam and Switch. Otherwise, if you liked the review, you can leave a like and subscribe to Overtake for more videos about racing games. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.